learned a new word this week. The word is Barnehage. It is Norwegian. I learned it from a friend of mine who lives in Norway, who posted on Facebook that she had just sent her younger daughter off for her first day of Barnehage. Barnehage is an exact Norwegian translation of the German phrase kindergarten, child garden. And I was charmed by the word, and I started thinking about that idea of Barnehage, child garden. And sort of going back and forth between these two ways of thinking about that phrase. It could be, the garden in which the children go to be safe and play. The Barnehage. Or it could be somehow the garden in which children are planted and grow. A garden of children, if you will. The place where children grow up taller, their faces turned towards the sun, just like so many sunflowers. It could also be a garden for the children to tend, their own child's garden. This morning we have the place filled with little plants, which we're hoping to give away today to our student neighbors and perhaps to some of you, so that they might have their own little Barnehage in their dorm room to tend. In the Hebrew scriptures, there are actually more than one creation story. And the best known is the one from the first chapter of Genesis, which begins with this primordial chaos and the word, "Let there be light." Even if you never made it past the first couple sentences of the Bible, you got to that one. So people know it. This first Genesis story speaks of a God who calls forth the cosmos with a word. It is creation on a grand scale, set in motion by divine command. Now, the story in 2nd Genesis, which Bruce read for us, is very different. Not just in the order of events, because you might have noticed that here we have humans first and then plants, and 1st Genesis is the other way around. But it's very different in another way, because in 2nd Genesis, creation is a very intimate, sort of hands-on process, playful even. God is not a sort of distant ruler who issues an edict. God is an artist with clay, or maybe even a child playing in mud. And from the ground, God forms a little creature which God calls Adam. It's a play on words, because you see, the word for ground is Adamah. It's like if I were to make a little person of clay and say, his name is Clay. You could translate the word Adam simply as human, also a name reflecting earthy origins. Think of humus, the soil. So God forms this little creature called Adam. I actually don't know if it's little, because what is it, life size? What are we going to measure it against? Measuring against God, we're little, right? God makes this little creature, a groundling, an earthling from the ground of the earth. And now, where to keep it? Well, where else but a garden? Now I'm sort of picturing, the frogs I would catch in the summer at my friend's farm. And then once we had the frog, where could it live? And we'd have to think about, well, what were all the things that a frog might need? In the end, we let it go back in the pond. So God makes a garden with all the things that these groundlings might need. Every tree that's beautiful to the eye and good to eat, God, knowing that we would need to feed our souls and our bodies. I can't help imagining God at this point as like a little bit like Mr. Rogers. I was a Mr. Rogers kid. I watched Mr. Rogers when I was little. And one of my favorite little sequences that I can remember was of Mr. Rogers putting together a little dollhouse and very carefully talking about all the things that would have to go in the dollhouse. And sort of like, we'll put these two little chairs together because maybe the people in the dollhouse will want to sit and have a chat with each other. Like you're sort of, thinking about what these small people might need. So God makes us a garden because it is what we need. So the book The Secret Garden is a favorite of mine in childhood and a favorite of my own children's, much to my delight. It tells the story of Mary Lennox, suddenly orphaned and uprooted from her home in India. She is placed in the care of an English uncle in Yorkshire, and she arrives there lonely and sullen. And she discovers that her uncle is much the same, turned inward as he is by grief over his wife's death and fear over his son's illness, which is so severe that the boy is kept locked away in his room and not allowed to play. So left on her own, Mary roams the ground. First, she befriends a local boy named Dickon. And then, magically, she discovers a secret garden, hidden and untended behind ivy-covered walls. First, she can't find the door. And when she finds the door, she can't find the key. Until somewhat miraculously, she's watching a robin and realizes that the robin is pointing her towards the key that's lying there. So she and Dickon together coax the garden back into life. In time, she grows stronger and braver and more hopeful. Hopeful enough to be generous. And she decides to share the garden with her invalid cousin. And she brings him outdoors against the advice of his doctors. And as the children coax the garden back to life, the garden coaxes them back to life. This story has proved, captivating to more than one generation of children now. And I think part of the magic of the story is that I think we all yearn for this garden, this secret garden, this Eden, this Barnehage, this place where growing things bloom and where everyone understands the preciousness of that egg and of every new, fragile, tender life. The Bible begins in such a garden. And it ends there as well with a prediction from the book of Revelation of a place where the river of the water of life, clear as crystal, will flow from the throne of the God down the middle of the street, and on each side of the river will stand the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit for every month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations, it says. In between those two extremes, we have the voice of the prophet Isaiah, imagining a time when the wolf will live with the lamb and the leopard will lie down with the goat and the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child shall lead them. Not just a child's garden, but a child's zoo, apparently. A place where the infant can play near the adder's den or put its hand on the viper's nest, because they will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, says God. We all yearn for this garden. Is this a remembered past? Perhaps. Or an imagined future? Perhaps. Because we know that we dwell right now in a world that is not free from violence. We know that we have done a poor job of tending our garden. And we know that our children are not always safe, even in kindergarten. But yet somehow we do not accept that this is just the way things are. Because we can imagine that other garden. And we have the vision, as this ancient story tells us, that somehow this whole green earth is intended to be a Barnehage, a kindergarten, a child garden, a place where we can grow and learn from the green things around us, a place wherever every young and tender thing is recognized as immeasurably precious, like the robin's egg. May it be so. Amen. I invite you to rise now and say,